The following episode of the SpongePod is brought to you by the Chum Bucket. Now, Tim, when I say chum, what do you think of?
I think of like a good old buddy or a good old pal, you know, good chum.
Yeah. Chum.
Hello, chum. I also think of like a bucket of like shark feed, what you'd feed to the sharks to attract them.
Yeah, like gross shrimp bits
gross
that you
fish
feed
parts,
to shark.
yeah.
Okay, that's strange because when I think of chum, I think of an amazing dining experience. Now, Tim, if I were to take it a step further and say, what do you think when I say chum bucket, what would you say?
Pretty similar. Just, that chum that we talked about to attract sharks, just in a bucket, perhaps a bucket for it. For that
strange.
Purpose.
I don't know if you know the English language in this situation, but no, a chum bucket is not a gross bucket of slop. It's actually, it makes me think of the premium dining experience located in the Bikini Bottom.
Oh, hadn't heard of that. What type of food do they serve at the chum bucket?
Well, they have the chum burger, a chum shake.
Do they have a chum taco?
Oh, let me check. No, they do not have a chum taco. They also have some chum chili. They have a chum stick and the world famous chum pie.
So pretty much any food just with the name chum before it?
Well, except for tacos, because why would they ever serve a chum taco? That doesn't make any sense. That's disgusting if you think about it.
All right. Go to the chum bucket for all of your premium chum dining needs.
I mean, just think about it. Chum in a taco, like what would even sour cream can't make that taste better.
Yeah.
You know?
You're right. How could I be so foolish? I don't even know what would make the chum.
You're an idiot. You're an idiot, Tim. You're an idiot for thinking that chum tacos would exist when they have chum sticks and chum chili.
That's why I'm the first mate and not the captain.
Yeah, one day you will know what types of tacos there are in the world, and maybe you can get on Indeed and see if you can apply for the captain position. Go to the chum bucket for all your dining needs.
Oh!
Yeah, welcome to the SpongePod. That beat is dope. All right, the official, unofficial podcast of SpongeBob SquarePants, where we overanalyze every episode and get down to the bikini bottom of your fan theories. All right, I'm the host and in-house SpongeBob expert, Eric. Are you ready, Tim?
Aye, Captain.
Oh, still a bummer. It's not the first of the year. What are you so bum about?
I guess that's true. It's so rainy, and I just don't remember how this joke works particularly.
I can't hear you, Tim. I can't hear you. Are you ready, Tim?
Aye, Captain.
Again, this joke, I don't know if we'll ever get it right. We'll figure it out. And I'm pretty sure at some point people will be rolling all over the place to hear the joke. How you doing, Tim? We're 2 episodes in to the main podcast. How you feeling?
I'm good. Again, as we said, New Year, still pretty new, as it were. Just getting into
2018. Well, and to clarify, we're gonna try to make this year better for you guys, right? I mean, last year was such a bummer in so many different ways, and we want to make your year better. So let us entertain you. Join us in this space. What were you gonna say, Tim? Before I rudely interrupted you?
No problem.
With optimism for the new year.
Just actually something very similar. Just that. Okay. I'm excited to these 2 episodes that we're analyzing today. They're very, they kind of expand the world of SpongeBob even more.
They definitely do.
That's very exciting very exciting.
Yeah. Well, first off, let's get some stuff out of the way. We want to mention that we have a winner from the social media quiz last week. That winner who won a prize is Carl Bloesch. Awesome. So congrats to Carl Bloesch for winning that prize. That was awesome. I mean, I'm glad that we already have social media interaction so early in the game. Today we are analyzing, overanalyzing 2 episodes, actually. 2 episodes in this SpongePod. One of them was too small to do an entire episode after, and so we just decided to put them together. We might do that from time to time. Don't get mad at us. We're doing our best. The 2 episodes that we are analyzing today are Reef-blower and Tea at the Treedome. Both of these episodes aired side by side with the first episode when SpongeBob originally came out. And then afterwards, we will be speaking with our resident anatomy expert, Kimmy Hoke, in a segment we like to call Anatomically Speaking with Kimmy. Now, first off, before we get into the SpongePod, I do want to mention if I do sound a little tired and a little less energized, I might emphasize that I did do my first Zumba class of the new year. I've never done a Zumba class before, and boy dandy, do those people move. It was tough, because sometimes you look at Zumba and you're like, oh, those people are just shaking. I can shake. But I tried getting in there and shaking it up, and I definitely did not have the same moves as SpongeBob shows in that opening episode, especially.
His little dance in there.
Yeah, just to give you a little update on Eric Thine. Not just talking sponges, we're talking Zumba too.
That's our next podcast. Talking Zoom.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Talking the buh.
Oh yeah. I was getting swole, and then I thought might as well sweat it out with some elderly ladies and a debatably strange looking guy. Who knows? But we had fun at that LA Fitness. Not that they sponsor the show. I just organically came to it. But anyway, to talk Reef-blower. Let's start off. So Squidward comes outside to a beautiful afternoon to find a single reef out of place in his otherwise perfect yard. He looks around to see if anyone is looking and then kicks it onto his neighbor SpongeBob's yard and carries along with his day. Upon waking up, SpongeBob also notices the disturbance in his yard and uses a reef blower to push it away, thus tormenting Squidward in various ways in the process. Finally, SpongeBob uses this presumably industrial blow/sucker to suck up the entire ocean and then pushes the reef and much more into Squidward's yard. Now, first off, I just want to analyze the physics of this cartoon, because a lot of cartoons, they take the time early on to establish that there are no physical rules in this world. Right. And essentially that's what SpongeBob is doing here. I mean, we obviously see a small, personal size reef blower being used. Obviously it breaks in the middle of the episode, in which he just kind of throws everything in and then it's used to suck up the entire ocean. I mean, what do you think about that situation, Tim? I mean,
kind of tough. I don't know.
I know. I asked you a really good question there. What do you think about the reef blower in this episode? We are just, ESPN and CNN just hold off. Okay. Let us get into the deep of this before you start judging us and our analysis. Tim, did you find
that was a really great question.
Ahead.
I dropped the ball on it, and I apologize about that.
Mate.
So I know.
Yeah, you can't be a captain if you drop the ball on such a great question. Like, what do you think about the reef blower in this episode?
That's 2 drop balls for me this episode. So,
oh my gosh,
I'm not doing so hot. So, let me just
get back on the board. Did you find anything? About the episode?
Let me do my job, and I'll tell you about one of the fan theories that I found.
Okay.
I believe this one was a Facebook one, actually. So,
Facebook. Okay.
Again, I'm just going to read it verbatim, and then we're going to talk about it. This is from user Devilish Homeowner 1997, and he or she says, the writers of SpongeBob are so obviously pro homeowners associations. Many people don't like HOAs because they're too strict and regulate too many things, like house color or amount of trees in the yard. But the writers of SpongeBob are saying, in the most ridiculous way possible, that there needs to be some sort of body to regulate interactions between neighbors in the neighborhood that SpongeBob, Patrick, and Squidward all live in. Otherwise, the whole ocean gets sucked up and we all die. Wow. Now, a little overblown, perhaps.
Tiny bit.
But what do you think about that theory?
Well, I like it. I don't think that a HOA would necessarily step in if everyone dies. It's that's kind of a little over the HOA's jurisdiction.
Yeah.
But in other ways, I mean, I could kind of see it. I think that obviously we show an unneighborly act by, Squidward in the opening scene of, him just kicking the reef into another person's yard. Now, if that was documented, if they had a Nest, video camera on his pineapple's front door, we might be able to get Squidward in a bit of trouble here.
Right.
I mean, that might be the case. So you're right. The HOA definitely would have benefited in this regard. But again, kind of like with the theories that we talked about in the first episode, I'm not too sure that the writers of SpongeBob were saying like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the writer of SpongeBob, like he did this with like actual leaves and his neighbor got mad at him and he thought, you know what? I'm going to live my life, truth and comedy. I'm going to live my life on the script and try to work this out. Yeah. What do you think about it, Tim?
I was, this is also brings up a very interesting piece of news that is fairly recent still is this when Rand Paul getting beat up by his neighbor over what we assume is some sort of yard
you would think
thing.
Yeah, you would think it's like a reef of sorts. I mean, they definitely they got into a dispute.
Yeah, and I don't know all the details of that one, but obviously, people take their yards pretty seriously.
Oh yeah,
I think obviously both SpongeBob and Squidward do because they're so excited when they're immaculate and they don't see anything. On them. But I do think it's interesting too, like kind of in that same vein. If you look at like the three houses, you've got Patrick, Squidward, and then SpongeBob. Yeah. Patrick and SpongeBob each have these like paved paths to their houses, and Squidward is just these like little rocks up to his house. And so you're like, does that stem from some sort of like debate that was had among the neighborhood where it was we're going to pay to get the whole road paved? And Patrick and SpongeBob are like, yeah. And Squidward's like, no, I'm not doing that. No. Yeah. And so, I think it hints at the possibility that there are many, like kind of homeowner type issues among Squidward and SpongeBob.
I wonder if that'll ever come up in further episodes. These people disputing their rights in their residence. So that is the summary and the analysis that you get for Reef-blower. Let's move right into Tea at the Treedome. First off, we see while jellyfishing, SpongeBob notices a squirrel tussling with a clam, and SpongeBob comes in to save the day, but eventually falls prey to the aforementioned clam. Sandy the squirrel eventually kicks its butt to save SpongeBob, and they become friends because they have a shared interest in karate. Sandy invites SpongeBob to her residence, and our faithful Sponge accepts. While preparing to go over, SpongeBob asks Patrick about the qualities of air, which Sandy breathes. And that's obviously quite different than what they are experiencing with breathing water. And Patrick gives him a speech about the fanciness of air and how to be fancy in front of Sandy. Now, Tim, what did you think of this scene?
So this scene is definitely really great. I really
it's a classic.
It's a classic. I love Sandy.
Oh, definitely.
I'm really glad that Sandy is, able to be introduced. I think it's hilarious that she's introduced as like a fighting squirrel, basically. That that SpongeBob kind of stumbles upon.
She's pretty much a karate master,
and she is a karate master, which does it brings up the most obvious question here is you think like, what on earth is Sandy doing like underwater? Like, how did you get there? She this comes up obviously in the rest of the episode, but she has this tree dome, and it's this really elaborate thing that's built, and obviously would have been very difficult to build. And so it's almost like she's on like a Mars mission where she like goes down. Like, did someone send her? Is she part of like a university of squirrels that are sent to study the ocean?
And later, I think they allude that she comes from Texas, obviously, or she refers to it in this episode, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But it is kind of interesting that the underwater world is quite different than our real world, and we could presume that the above ground world in this in the SpongeBob universe is quite different than our above ground world, because when we need to do marine research, we aren't necessarily referring to squirrels. Right. We do have a surplus of squirrels in our world. I mean, I drive by squirrels all the time. I never see any other animal, but I see squirrels nonstop. It would be really beneficial to start using squirrels in a research facility.
I think so.
Yeah, that's interesting. The thing that popped out for me is, first and foremost, like, Sandy hands out a map that like they're fighting with this clam, and they're moving all around that area. It's not like they stand still. You know what I mean? They're fighting in this area, and then when she invites SpongeBob over, basically SpongeBob accepts, and then she pulls out this map that says, "You are here. Here is like directions to my place." Which I think is hilarious, because I don't know how she like updated that so quickly to make it like geologically correct. Like, at what point, was she like, oh, maybe in my left pocket, if I'm standing in this exact spot, this is where it is, you know what I mean? And perfectly, you will have instructions as to where, because I could see myself getting lost underwater
easily
quite often. And so she also probably has interacted with other fish who got lost on the way to her place. And obviously came up with this idea for a map. And the other thing that came to mind in this situation is, do we see a love relationship brewing? Like, right off the bat, and let's clarify, this is the third and final segment of the first episode that we see SpongeBob. Are they introducing a love interest already? And how hard would it be to mate between a sponge and a squirrel? I mean, a sponge is asexual and squirrel is obviously an animal. I mean, that seems like a very difficult relationship with a rocky anatomy going right off the bat.
Yes, rocky anatomy is a good word to use there. Yeah, I mean, that's obviously, that's almost like, I do think perhaps, maybe not. I was gonna say perhaps the anatomy aspect of it is jumping ahead a little bit too much, in the sense that you don't have to actually be in some sort of relationship, but they both really enjoy the karate, as is seen in this scene. One thing, I mean, I was thinking about, it happens a little later in the episode, but basically, so two things. SpongeBob brings flowers, which is kind of a traditional, like, it could be like, welcome to the neighborhood, but also could be like, welcome to the neighborhood,
welcome to my heart.
Welcome to my heart. But
you squirrel.
And even more maybe inflammatory or suggestive is the fact that Sandy comes to the door like in a bathing suit. Like, she's in the Treedome. She could wear just like pants and like a t-shirt. But she comes in, in the swimsuit. And so it's like, is that a little suggestive? If Patrick hadn't been there, if Patrick wasn't there, what could have happened?
Oh man, my mind is racing with the love that could have pursued. But let us first hear, before we go into any further with the juicy details of what happens next, let's hear from a word from one of our sponsors. Weenie Huts Juniors.
I'm sorry, what?
Weenie Huts Juniors.
What are you saying?
Weenie.
I mean, I can hear you. I just don't get
Huts.
We all know what you're going to say. It's honestly just kind of annoying at this point.
Make sure you go see the Weenie Huts Juniors for all your weenie needs.
I know nothing about that company from that ad.
All right, welcome back to the SpongePod. Thanks for hearing those messages from our sponsors. Make sure to like and subscribe. Tell your friends about it as well. Leave us a review. That helps way more than you can imagine. Helps us figure out who we need to advertise to and get that message from Bikini Bottom to you. Now let's get right back into the episode. Sandy lets in her guest, SpongeBob, and he is distraught by the lack of air, misunderstanding his need for water. So he overcompensates. He looks big and buff in front of Sandy, and SpongeBob almost dies before sucking down a glass of water from a piece of table dressing. Then comes Patrick to save the day, and eventually he too falls victim to the air debacle. And Sandy finds both SpongeBob and Patrick completely dried up. Sandy then provides them with a helmet of water and saves the day once again. What do you think about this, Tim?
So one of my favorite parts about this episode, one of the things that they, as a gag that the writers or who the creators of the show keep constantly going back to, is this like showing either like Patrick or SpongeBob in like the real world, like they show like a real sponge. And I think that's funny. And this is the first instance where we get that, you know, SpongeBob and Patrick dry out, Sandy comes back and they see them, and then, you know, they're revived. But I think it really, you know, it brings up this really great question that we need to talk about, and that's exemplified by this fan theory that I have for you. And so I'll read it and then we'll talk about it. It's a short one. So this is from Rob Zombie 2292 on 4chan. He writes, I think that SpongeBob and Patrick die in this scene, and effectively moving forward, SpongeBob and Patrick are ghosts, tormenting Bikini Bottom through the rest of the SpongeBob television series.
Oh man,
that's a big one, Eric. What do you think?
That's a juicy theory. That is a meta theory that like these two might die in the first day of this new TV show on Nickelodeon. That they secretly die in some Lost type, theory, because a lot of the characters, I don't know about Lost. Anyway, I don't know. This is very interesting because that would sort of assume that the rest of Bikini Bottom can see ghosts.
Yes,
and
that's the assumption.
Yeah, and that they can fully interact with all the physical material down under, so to speak. I don't know what to make of it. I mean, what do you think?
That was the point I was going to bring up as well. If SpongeBob and Patrick are ghosts, then that means like the whole town's kind of crazy. That's kind of part of it. But I will say it is possible, and I don't know. We'll have to see moving forward, but it is possible that this kind of has one of those like effects on SpongeBob and Patrick where like, those stories of people who like die for 10 minutes and they see heaven. Like, did SpongeBob and Patrick see like starfish and sponge heaven? Like, I think that's a possibility that they, I don't know what those heavens look like. Or if,
we don't even know what human heaven looks like, much less sponge heaven and starfish heaven.
But what we do know is that all dogs go to heaven.
All dogs do go to heaven, but I'm not sure if that means that Gary, who's a snail, but effectively like the cat of the world, I don't know if he's going to heaven or not.
That's true. I hadn't thought about Gary.
Yeah. This is a very, very theological episode for sure, as we see the sponge and the starfish die. I just want to emphasize this was a cultural phenomenon for, I think, a lot of us in this generation who loved SpongeBob. I, for one, whenever I'm sipping down a good old glass of coffee, a lot of times I will keep my pinky out. And I remember, when I was a dating man, I'm now married my wife, Becky. And I remember when I was dating and I was trying to impress people, I would have that pinky out. That was a fancy move that I learned from this show, and I really held on to it. Even now, I find myself with nobody to impress. It doesn't really matter who likes the sights of Eric Thine, as long as my wife is happy, right? But I still try to look fancy and keep that pinky out. Is this something that really influenced you as well?
Fancy pinky is interesting. I will definitely say not something that I think about or do, but I will also say, like, I don't eat a lot of fancy dinners. I feel like I'm often perhaps a little perplexed by the amount of forks that I have in front of me. If there's any sort of thing that's fancy, if there's more than two, I'm like, what do I do with more than two forks, And so I think personally, I gotta say, I think I could learn something from this episode of SpongeBob.
You are definitely not the fancy side. You give no cares about whether or not people think that you're fancy or if you're Timmy or not. You know what I mean?
That's true. And I think that's
I don't know what that expression means, but yeah, it's a good and bad thing. What we definitely know is that this episode meant a lot to all of us. And this was just a very, this was one of the pinnacle moments of SpongeBob is the fancy talk. And Patrick pepping SpongeBob up as he's about to meet a potential date in Sandy. We can definitely all agree that this is a great episode. Thank you for listening to that hard-hitting over-analysis of the episode Treedome, and we are going to now pivot into one of my favorite segments of this show, of the new show. It is called Scientifically Speaking with Dr. Kimmy Hoke. Now we have Kimmy on the phone. Kimmy, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm real glad to be here.
I'm glad you could be here. So we're listening to we're watching a really cool episode. Basically within the episode, SpongeBob and Patrick completely dry up, right? They look as dry as it can be. It's just very strange because the very next scene, Sandy gives them water and they are completely fine. Like absolutely no problem at all. They're just sipping back. They're back to their Saturday afternoon. My first question for you from the scientific standpoint is, do sponges and starfishes have souls?
Well, I guess that depends on whether you believe all dogs go to heaven.
Okay. So what you're saying is there isn't a book in your scientific books that say, do sponges and stars have souls? That isn't in
nothing
the book?
on my shelves address that at all.
Okay.
So that would be a personal belief of whether or not you thought that they had souls.
Oh, so this is more of a religious type idea. Yeah, it's not necessarily a scientific idea. Okay. So do stars or sponges die?
Well, yeah, and I think that if SpongeBob and Patrick actually had no water, they would completely die.
Okay, and they can't just come back to life by putting, because we can buy starfish, at the nearest Jimmy Buffett's, cheeseburger in paradise, and you walk right in, they got starfish all over the place. You could buy them, but you can't put them in the water and they won't survive. Correct. They need water to survive. They can regenerate. Both of them can regenerate. What does regenerate mean?
Well, if a part of them were broken off or cut off, they could grow back that part. Or even if enough parts of them were broke off, they could, the starfish could become a new starfish.
Okay, so what about if my starfish arm fell off? Would the starfish arm then start its own gang? Would it start its own thing?
No,
could it be a separate? It has to be all together.
Well, so if you look at a starfish, there's a central part to it. So it has to have that central part with it to become a new organism. Okay. Because that's called the central valve.
See, that makes me feel like they do have souls then. Because it makes me feel like the heart of the star or the sponge is what's kind of keeping it, theoretically together.
Okay, so the sponge and the starfish are from two different phyla of animals.
Oh, wow. That's a big word. Or a small big word. It's a small word that I don't know.
It's a small. Okay, so it's a division. So if you have the animal kingdom is broken up into different divisions. Two of them are the starfish, which is called the Echinodermata, and then that's one of them, and the other one is called Porifera, which is the sponges.
Oh wow, that is really interesting, because I guess I never really thought about what family group sponges would fall in, but I need to do my research as the captain of the SpongePod. That would make sense for me to have to do some research onto what a sponge is in general.
Yeah, they're not even related, except that they're both animals. They're not plants or bacteria.
Oh wow! So you could actually presume to say that SpongeBob and Patrick in this moment completely died, and this is the third episode of the entire show. So after this episode, they're just walking dead almost. They're like zombies.
Yeah, they would not be there. They need the water to survive because they have. Well, SpongeBob has no organs.
Really? No organs at all?
No organs, no tissues. It's all just a group of cells working together.
Man, this is groundbreaking research that is happening on the SpongePod. So kids, just in reference, if you're in your scientific class and you have your headphones in, you're listening to the SpongePod because you don't want to hear what that boring science teacher has to say. Just realize later on in your life, when you're 27 years old, you might just host a podcast about SpongeBob, and some of this will be relevant. I just want to inspire the youth to continue their studies. All right, Kimmy, another hard-hitting question here, headed your way. So in this episode, we see SpongeBob kind of hitting on Sandy. Now, what might we expect might be complications of these two hitting on each other?
Okay, so sponges are asexual. So that means that, well, I mean, I guess they could not reproduce. Like a sponge only reproduces with itself. It like has little, it's called budding. It forms little sponges off itself and then they break off and they're a new sponge. Oh, wow. Yeah. That sounds really complicated. Way more complicated than what we deal with in the other side of that spectrum. But so it's not even an ethical question at this point, right? She's a squirrel. Oh yeah, no. How does Sandy live under there? Oh, she has a bubble on her head. That's right. Yeah, she has an air suit. Yeah. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us on the pod. I'm glad that we could all get a little science lesson as to how both squirrels and sponges not only reproduce, but how they breathe and they exist. Thanks for joining us, Kimmy. My pleasure. Good to talk to you. All right. Thanks a lot to Kimmy Hoke for the great conversation, anatomically speaking, with Kimmy Hoke. I hope we can bring her on again. Wasn't that a great conversation, Tim? Good. It was very, we like to be entertaining, but we also like to be very informational on this show. Oh, yeah. So I hope we want you to learn. We want you to grow. I want to learn. We want you to know. I want to learn too. I want to learn more than you want to learn, Tim. We're going to make this a competition, aren't we? Who wants to learn more? I want to learn more. That's the captain. Yeah, you are not as learning as I am. Anyway, a few shout outs. Our associate producer is Aaron Grammy Grimes. Creative producer is Anna the Banana Rainey. We have data research by Jackie Smith. Our office assistant is Zach Cooper. Audio engineer is Jessica Brummett. Music by the DJ Eugene. Cover art by the Milky himself, Michael G. Michael Gearhart, that is. Childcare producer is Christina Crosley. This was another great episode. I think we're 2 for 2. I don't know what you think, Tim, but I think we are 100% at this point. 2 for 2. Thanks for joining me, Tim. This was a great episode. Thank you for joining us. Make sure you like and subscribe. Check us out on Twitter at The SpongePod. We're also on Facebook, and whatever social media needs you need, let us know. You stay classy, Bikini Bottom. Stay classy, everybody. Oh, yeah. Will Ferrell did not do it nearly as good as I did it there. Agreed. And I even tied in Bikini Bottom. That one's 5 words. It's very simple. It's straight. It's to the point. I like it. Yeah, we're getting better. We're getting better. Cool.